I have mentioned earlier, we now go directly to a conversation with you. If you have questions, but also comments, insights, reflections, which you want to share not only to the lead discussants but to the assembly. So there are 4 microphones there.
In 14 years as an educator, it has been a struggle. We have the first irritating thing that I always hear from my bosses, from my superiors, is always to say, remember to teach the language in English. And I remember years ago when I went in theology, how can I express the faith in a language that is foreign to my own sensibilities? Until now, this is a struggle for me. Because until now in my present work, we are still required to, speak it, teach it in English. And we miss the beauty of the language. We miss the beauty of my own language, the vernacular, in trying to express theological thoughts, in trying to express the experience of the holy, and also the experience of the other. Siguro this is a comment, but at the same time a question. How can we further raise the consciousness in schools, not only in schools of theology, but also in schools which teach the faith, to also appreciate our own language, our own sensibilities? It seems it's a struggle, a difficulty for us to find beauty in using our own language, particularly in teaching the mystery of God and the mystery of Christ, and also the mystery of our community as a church, whether colonial, post-colonial.
Thank you. Would you like to respond to it?
Yeah. Years ago, when I first taught my graduate class, the doctorate graduate class in theology, I decided to use Filipino. And immediately, the students coming from different regions of the Philippines raised their hands and objected that Tagalog is not their language. Okay, I accepted that, but I said, I still want to try to use Filipino. If you want to ask a question in English, because you cannot ask it in the vernacular, ask it and I will answer you in English. If this still doesn't work within 1 month of my explaining in Filipino, then we will revert to English. That was a very significant class for me, because we never reverted back to English. And the conclusion was, and I remember it very well from the students, not only did they say they understood the lessons more clearly, but they felt it. That's the very word that they used. Damang-dama namin ang kurso.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Belen, you want to say something?
I agree with Jose. I can a little explain. If we have dominant language, we have dominant thinking, dominant cognition, and we have dominant reality. If we have dominant colonial language, we have colonial thinking, cognition, and colonial reality. It is true.
Medyo related sa huling taon na may tanong. Kailangan ba ng structural change din kung dapat palitan ang wika mula sa English, sa Tagalog, or sa mga ibang wika sa Pilipinas? Kailangan ba din ang structural change? Halimbawa, ngayon, kung gusto ni yung mga tao pumasok sa UP or Ateneo, English ang mga exams, or yung merong dating tanong din, yung karamihan ng mga financing sa mga aralan ng English. So, ang tanong ko, kailangan ba din ang structural change at saka yung palitan ng lugar din? Hindi nasa Manila yung mga academic center or sa mga malaking lungsod, pero dapat sa mga ibang lugar din, halimbawa sa Tondo or sa mga area ng mga squatter, at saka kailangan ba din palitan din yung mga standards ng education, yung mga teaching methodologies. So yan ang tanong ko, kailangan ba ng structural change para palitan ang wika din? Salamat.
Kailangan talaga.
Joe, can you just briefly translate for Since the question is for you, maybe you can just give them an idea what the question is all about.
He was asking whether there is a need for structural changes in the shifting of the language in education. And I said, yes, certainly, you need structural change. They have already begun it in UP. University of the Philippines has started to give entrance exams in Filipino rather than in English. That much I know. The other schools, I don't know. As you well know, the government of President Corazon Aquino mandated the use of Filipino in every branch of the government. It remains to be implemented. Because even the government officers continuously speak in English. What I find very pathetic is a scene which I have witnessed in a court. A poor man was being tried and he could not speak in English, but the language of discourse was totally in English. So you had to translate for him what was said in English. That was very pathetic. Because I think the poor are at a disadvantage when it comes to this language issue.
Thank you. Just a note for that. I maybe for our knowledge, in your countries, Mila and Michelle, you speak in your own language, teaching theology in your language too.
It is normally we need different languages, but not dominant language. It is problem. Dominant on the colonial language. So this seventh language, dominant language, it is problem. We need different equal language with equal rights. It is normal. We need dialogue between languages. We need all languages, Latin language, Arabic language, Hebrew language, English language, all language, but not only domination of language over other languages. It is problem.
Thank you. Michelle?
Well, in Germany, the situation is different. We teach in German, and as you notice, my English is very bad. We are not used to teach in English at university. But I remember a situation from Bolivia. During my studies, I spent a year in Bolivia, in Cochabamba, at the university there, and all students of theology had to learn the local language Quechua. But I think it's another question, because they had to learn it because of necessity of pastoral, but not to do theology in Quechua. And I think these are two different things, and what you are demanding is to think, to do theology in your own language, and it is very, very important.
Thank you. Yes, please. John?
Thank you. I don't get to sit down now. Thank you. English language, for example, is, I think, one good advantage with that is that we are now in a globalized world, and for us to promote our research, our findings, our theology, we see the advantage of having that language. We are bicultural, bilingual. The problem is, I think, is that when somebody from outside, from the West, coming in and studying us, and you speak Filipino. And I think that's where the problem comes in. And that is why it's so important for us. We are bilingual. My first language is Filipino. That's why when I did my research, I could understand them. But at the same time, I know English, so I can promote the culture of the Filipinos when I go out. And that's the only way that they will understand that, hey, there's a Filipino psychology. It is not only the Western psychology. It is not only the philosophy of the psychology, or the philosophy or theology of the West. And that's why it's so important for us, educators, to be bilingual. And for that, when I I'm doing research in my own culture, in my own context, where I am at home, but at the same time, I can communicate that to the outside world. I think that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that sharing. Somebody was, yes, please.
Sister Sikim Xavier from Thailand, and I think this is opposite in my country. In the seminary, they are trying to push their seminarians to speak English more and learn more in English, because many seminarians cannot articulate or learn in other language, and this is also a problem for Thai people to go abroad and articulate their knowledge or share what's going on. I think we should learn to know other language as well, but to be balanced, that how can we learn and can share our knowledge and can also learn from other people. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, that's same matter of sharing. Yes, please.
I guess without preempting the last session of Theologies of the Future, I just like to reiterate my standpoint. In a world, of course, where we're sensitive to linguistic domination and languages associated with power, I suppose it's inevitable that Christianity is really pushes the act of translation. And I say this because in the act of translation, you preserve both the originating language and the indigenous language. So it's always a mediating force. So in that sense, the power play that will be at work is no longer which language is dominant or which language should be preferred, but precisely how do you translate. So it goes to the politics of translation. And I think Christianity cannot happen without the phenomenon of translation. And this goes back perhaps even to the Old Testament, when the Jewish community decided to translate the Bible from Hebrew into Greek. And that carries symbolic value for Christianity, because it is the Septuagint that flows into the composition of the New Testament. And second, we never have recorded precisely what Jesus had said. Jesus spoke probably in Aramaic, but it was retranslated into the Greek. So the phenomenon of translation is very critical to our self-identity as Christians. And I think we have to promote the theology of translation as a path for the future. Thank you.
I agree.
All right, thank you. Jojo Fu. I'm a Malaysian, but I'm here in Manila. I was quite thankful to Loyola School of Theology for providing an opportunity whereby the 2 weeks of theologizing can be from the lived experience of the Aita people in Tarlac. When you spoke, I realized that for me, I just realized that it is really one way to deconstruct and so decolonize the way we do theology. I'm so used to like thinking Western theology of the global North and then applying it to our situation in the global South. I realize how fallacious that is. No? I think that is really a fallacy in doing theology as an Asian, as a Malaysian. No? I just realized that that is the greatest sin I have committed myself, no? Against myself who is an Asian. I realized that when we live with the Ayata people, the community of learners who are implanted were in the company of the Ayata community. Our body, our minds, our heart picks up their language, their worldview and worldview. There is a theology in their midst called the traditional belief system. There is a sense of communion, the theology of communion. I think we need to learn a lot more from those communities who are living it, but not articulating it the way so coherently in the Western sense. That's not the language that we find it normative. But I think the community of theological students, I think the School of Theology, our presence become a learning experience whereby they tutor and mentor us their language of theology. And perhaps we can learn that because the Spirit is also at work there. So that process of decolonization of our theology, I find it very, very challenging, very challenging. No? And then their concepts they're giving to us. No? Anito is spirit, good spirit. No? Umpukan is a gathering. Mga nito are persons who relate to the spirit, to the nature, to the ancestors, to the land, to the earth. No? Those are terms which are relational, but also filled with meanings. They also have a local hermeneutics that we need to learn from and with. No? I think that's the way we should begin learning our theology afresh, anew, from the global South, from the land, from the hearts and the minds, the worldview and feel of the local communities. Secondly, I just want to say that one student asked a question, no? If we begin from their premise, their experiences, and we co-experience with them, have we always to legitimize their experience and then we thematize it with the corpus of Western theology or Eurocentric theology? Must we always live under the shadow of a Western-centric theology? Is there a way by which we say that the corpus of theology, especially those generated from the global South, are resonating their already existing lived embodied theology? I realized I was challenged and I don't have an answer for that. I think now is to say that their lived theology, while articulated by us, and then we resonate, is also resonated by the church documents. I find myself not wanting to legitimize the experience using Western-centric theology. I'm not sure whether I'm making sense, but I'm trying to decolonize myself so that the Asian self is not suppressed, erased, or suicide killed. Yeah,
I hope I'm making some sense in English.
Thank you, John. Would you like to say something? Or?
It is interesting for me. Colonialism and post-colonialism have the same logical form. Today, colonialism, post-colonialism, everywhere produce violence on this earth. Produce together violence on this earth. It is problem. Both have the same logical form, the same logic of power, the same logic of violence. It is problem. We need change from logic of power to logic of goodness, to evangelic logic. It very good.
Thank you very much. Yes, Joe?
This might help in the conversation. This morning we invoked the Holy Spirit. I think the role of the Holy Spirit in all these discourses has been underestimated. We should, I think, reconfigure the missions of the persons of the Trinity, with the Holy Spirit going first, followed by the Son, and then ending up with the Father. Why the Spirit? Because our tradition speaks that the Holy Spirit was there from the beginning of creation. Therefore, when we conceive creation as initial salvation, the work of salvation has begun with the Spirit. Therefore, the traditions of the indigenous peoples, their belief systems, are all inspired by the Spirit.
Thank you. The one participant. At the back, please. She was ahead.
Thank you. My name is Maricor Baition. I'm also an independent editor. I hope the Holy Spirit has enlightened me as I give my comments, but I'm very excited to find out that the panel, even if the theme was theology, colonization, and power, actually talked about literature and language, and those are things very near to my heart. And I thank you for your different presentations. I would very much be interested to learn more about the Bosnian trilogy, content and synopsis, and how it was performed. But for now, I would like to make a comment on the presentation of Father de Mesa, Dr. de Mesa, Kahuse, if I may.
Father of the family.
Okay, sorry. I think I get your point about the poor being at a disadvantage in the setting of the court, but I have a problem with the formulation, and I beg to disagree that they are at a disadvantage when they do not speak English. In fact, we are at a disadvantage when we do not speak the language of the other. I am very interested in reading stories, for example, to kids everywhere in different places, and I feel that I can't do it because I cannot speak the languages of people in the islands, people in the mountains, people in the countryside, and I feel that it is our disadvantage rather than the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a good way of looking at it.
Yes. Maricor, you have a question also for Mille, right? Okay, it's just. Thank you. Perhaps we have one more. Yes, please.
The English language is actually imposed by the colonizer, but for the immigrant, they are forced to learn the language in Germany.
As part of the assimilation. So it's a form of colonization, but it's something done because they're forced to leave their homeland. So, so language is really just a means, an instrument of power. And it's just a question of who wield the power and what language to be imposed. So how do we resist that? And I think that's a problem in Germany, because when I was there, people are talking that the immigrants could not assimilate from the immigrant coming from Turkey and now from Syria, Middle East. They could not assimilate, and I think that's also the issue raised in other European countries. Assimilation means they should learn the language of the country where they decide to settle, which means depth for their culture. Because language is really important in maintaining and communicating their culture. How do you deal with that? For the Filipinos, using our own language is a form of resistance.
Very important question, but I'm not sure if really demand to learn the language really is a form of colonization. I think it is important. If I want to live in a country, it's easier for me to do it by knowing the language. And because of that, I think you have, on the one hand, you have to learn the language. But the problem is, it should be possible to speak German in some contexts, but to speak your own language in other contexts. And if, like politicians in the past demanded, there should, all people should speak German at school, in their homes, everywhere. Oh, this is a kind of colonization, of course, yes. You have different communities and you have different contexts where you can speak different language. I suppose it should be possible. And by doing that, you can live with your different identities, and also this should be possible. But I'm not so sure if I agree with you that to learn German or to demand learning German is a form of colonization. I think I would disagree.
Thank you. Billy first, and then I'll ask Joe to be.
I will make joke. It's interesting. In history, European countries occupied, conquered many colonies. Now immigrants will colonize Germany.
Thank you. Joe, you'd like to respond? That would be the last question or comment.
Maybe there's a way of seeing another language as a form of survival, not resistance. Because people need to live. They are in search of life. Therefore, another language which they use functionally is meant for survival.
Okay, thank you very much to our discussants. Thank you very much also for participating in the conversation.